Welcome to this celebratory How Good Is Your Chess, featuring the British Chess Championships from Bournemouth, which, as we all know, start on the 24th of July 2016. I'm Andrew Martin, and I've pulled out a game from actually the last time the British Championship took place in Bournemouth. Well, the Men's and Women's Championship combined, and that was as long ago as 1936. There was a Women's Championship in 1939 in Bournemouth, but no Men's Championship that year, presumably due to the outbreak of war. Hope you enjoy this exercise. As usual, the very best thing is not just to let the video run through. I'm going to stop the game at certain points and ask you to choose between three moves, and then we'll see what the winner played as we go along, and you can score up your points and see if you can play as well as the winner did. And the game is between the famous Sir George Thomas, playing with the white pieces, and he's playing Frank Parr with the black pieces, who was one of England's best players for decades. England was not a front-ranked nation at that time, and we can see that because the men's champion in 36 was actually William Winter, who actually finished last in the famous Nottingham tournament of that year. If you don't know anything about the Nottingham tournament of 1936, look it up. One of the strongest tournaments ever to have taken place in England, before or since. So let's pick up on this game between George Thomas and Frank Parr, with Thomas employing the exchange variation of the Queen's Gambit, which we actually get into via a Cambridge Springs move order. With c6, Black is saying, well, I want you to play knight f3, and then I'm going to go queen a5, introducing the famous Cambridge Springs variation. Thomas shows no real desire to go into that line, and so he settles for c takes d5. And after e takes d5, queen to c2. Black went bishop e7, white went bishop d3, black castled, and now Thomas played knight e2. So we quickly realise that this game is indistinguishable between 1936 and the present day. We see this position very commonly in Grandmaster chess, or games of all levels, in fact. And Black chooses, I think, one of the best moves, rook to e8. Now, a modern player would probably think at this point with the white pieces, because there's plenty of choice. Sir George went knight to g3, and you can see the attraction of that move. He's eyeing up the f5 square. But I'm not at all sure that is actually the best move in this current situation. In fact, White's got a very interesting choice between obviously castling on either side and a move like h3. The point of all these moves is really to delay moving this knight on e2. We don't know quite where we want it yet. It might be better placed on e2 for the time being. It might sometimes come to f4. To me, knight g3 looks a little bit premature, and Parr decides to hit the bishop with h6. Well, I think actually White should probably just take on f6 in this position, but Thomas lashes out with the move h4. And now we come to the first position where you have to guess Black's next move, and I'm going to give you three choices. Option A is simply to snap off that bishop. Are you going to accept the free gift that Sir George is offering you? Alternatively, will you play bishop d6? Finally, will you just ignore h4 altogether and play knight f8, which is very thematic for this type of position. Black just drops back, setting his bishop free on c8 and guarding the squares g6 and h7. So those are your three options. Option A, take off the bishop. Option B, bishop d6. Option C, knight f8. Stop the video now, consider these moves, and then make your choice. Okay, well, I think the fact is that all of these moves were pretty good for Black. I don't really rate this move h4 at all, and Parr decided to take off that bishop. So if you were brave and you took the bishop, give yourself 10 points. We'll see why as we go on through the game. Bishop d6, 5 points. There's nothing wrong with that which can be seen when we analyse, but I doubt many of you chose that move. It looks as though it makes life too easy for white, but in reality it's not so easy to take advantage of this bishop move. For instance, if white goes knight f5, which is actually what I would probably do myself if I was confronted with bishop d6, then black just drops back. And the point of putting the bishop on d6 is, of course, to freeze this bishop in time on g5. He's probably got to take on f6 now. We take back with the knight. White can castle on the queenside. Well, to me, that's not really punishing white for his mistake h4. I think black is perfectly okay in this position. There's nothing wrong with black's position at all. But white will clearly have some attacking chances. Just dropping back to h4, bishop d6. White should probably play just bishop takes f6 here. And again, that's letting white off the hook to an extent. But even here, we see that this knight is perhaps misplaced on g3. And white's probably got to play knight f5. Going back, of course, black can play knight f8, 5 points. That's a solid move, intending bishop f4, knight e6. This starts to look quite nice for black. But again, I think you're letting white off the hook. He can just simply take on f6 and then castle on the queenside. And whilst white's position is nothing to write home about, it's probably about level. Black can take on h4 and brave the complications. But again, this is not punishing white for his mistake. So, black takes on g5. If you did that, very good. You're brave. White recaptured. And now we come to the follow-up, because it's obviously important to have a follow-up to this capture on g5. So did black, in this position, play option A, g6, cheerfully giving back the piece? Did he play option B, knight to g4? The knight looks intimidatingly posted on that square. Or did he play knight e4, trying to block white out in the centre? So those are the three options: g6, knight g4, or knight e4. Stop the video and consider your choice. Okay, well, the first point to note is that g6 is rubbish in this position. I hope you didn't choose that move. -5 points if you did, because that just runs into bishop takes g6. I dare say white could also take on f6, regaining his piece, but this move is very strong. You don't want to allow a demolition sacrifice of this type, just bringing all the white pieces into the attack. So g6 would be a mistake. More interesting is knight g4, and I'm going to give this 5 points. It looks risky to strand the knight on a square where he has no retreat, but black has also some tactical ideas himself in this position. For instance, if white goes bishop h7 check, black goes king f8, and now white plays bishop f5, trying to nab the knight and at the same time threatening rook to h8, then black's got the interesting move bishop d6. And if bishop takes g4, black takes on g3. Now, if you saw these complications, award yourself an extra 5 points, but only if you consider what will happen after rook h8 check. The king comes out to e7, white takes on e8 and gets to take on g3, but then comes queen takes g5. Well, this move activates the black queen. It hits the bishop, it hits c3, so white's got to continue by taking on d7, black recaptures, king f2, bishop f5. This is probably a slightly better position for black, but nothing completely clear-cut. However, knight g4 is not a bad continuation because of this variation. So as I say, if you saw all that, give yourself up to 5 bonus points. But the best move, as played by par, is knight to e4, 10 points. Black is willing to return a pawn to put the brakes on white's attack. So Sir George took on e4 with the bishop, pawn takes bishop, and then queen takes e4. And now we come to the next position where you've got to make your choice. Did black play bishop takes g5, option A? Did black play option B, the calm knight to f8? Or did black play option C, the blocking move, g6? So bishop takes g5, knight f8, or g6. Over to you. Well, I think there's only one good move here. And bishop takes g5 is not that move. -5 points. The problem with that is that it allows white to play queen h7 check and then knight f5, which is a bit embarrassing to say the least. White's threatening g7, he's threatening h8, and both of those moves are mate in one. Black is struggling here. Just dropping back, we run this variation all the way back. g6 would also be a mistake, -5 points, failing to queen h4. You just can't play casually in this position. You've let white in, he's going to crush you on the h-file. So that leaves the only move, and scoring 10 points, the calm knight to f8. Very calm indeed, because of course black knows he's allowing the move queen h4. But he intends to answer that with f5, giving the king an escape square. And that's exactly what Frank Parr did. So Sir George came in with his queen, and then came in with his knight. And this is precisely the type of bold attack which club players find so difficult to defend against, because it's easy to panic in this type of situation. It looks as though white is really crunching black's king with the threat to g7. But you've got to keep calm in these situations. And so we now come to the next point at which you have to choose the move. So did Frank Parr play? Again, a calm move here. Knight to e6. Just protecting g7. Did he run for the hills with his king? King to e6. Is it beyond the bounds of possibility that black could just escape to the queenside with his king, remaining a piece up? That certainly seems possible. And finally, did black play bishop takes g5, allowing the capture on g7, and then king to e6? What is white doing in this situation? So just retracting to knight h5, what is your choice? Okay, so knight e6, 10 points. That's the best move by a long chalk. The reason is it not only defends against the threat on g7, it attacks the white queen, forcing a loss of time. And this is the important point about that move. White has to lose time with his queen, giving black a chance to recuperate. King e6, well, if you played that, I'm going to give you 1 point for boldness, but really that is not what black should be doing in this position, because if you think you're going to be given time to escape to the queenside, you're sadly mistaken. For instance, white can immediately play d5, opening lines for his pieces, really getting ready to castle long. And if black runs again, then we can take on g7 with the knight. Black's in a terrible tangle here, and he can't untangle in time to save his game. For instance, if he goes bishop d6, we can come in with the rook. The white pieces simply pour into the game, and black can't coordinate here. He can't untangle in time. So that would be no good at all. Only 1 point. Going back, bishop takes g5. Well, again, that move just allows queen takes g7 check. 0 points for bishop takes g5. And after king e6 castles on the queenside, I imagine that the white attack is completely winning. Because again, black can't untangle. All the white pieces are coming into the attack. The move d5 is imminent. You just can't play like this. I think white is going to crush you within a few moves. But knight e6, I imagine that's what virtually all of you played, and well done for that. White plays queen h7. So, white is retaining threats. He's now thinking about taking on f5. He's got g6 in the wings. There are various ideas in the position. So what comes next? Will you play bishop f8? just defending G7? That's option A. Will you boldly take the pawn on G5? Again, allowing the capture on F5. Or finally, will you play Rook to G8? Defending against G7 one more time. So the options: Bishop F8, Bishop takes G5, or Rook G8. Back to you. Right, well clearly Black has to be very careful in this position. And I'm not sure that a move like Bishop F8 is the right one, because it makes the bishop very passive. It lets White take on F5. King goes to E7 and now D5. This move D5 is the one I really would like to stop, because again it's bringing all the white pieces into the game, and the king on E7 just seems like a sitting duck for the white knight. So Bishop F8, I'm afraid, only gets 1 point. Rook G8 similarly puts the black pieces in a tangle. Again, White's allowed to take on F5 check. The king drops away, and now D5 is the key move once again, bringing the knight into the game. Castling on the queenside is coming. The black king is going to be trapped in the middle. So this time I think you've got to be bold and take on G5 with the bishop. 10 points. Allowing queen takes F5 check, and now blocking with the bishop on F6. That's the main point of this bishop takes G5. It's not the pawn that matters. Well, it is in a way, but it's the ability to block on F6 that differentiates that move from the rest. So White castled on the queen side, which brings us to a further fork in the road. So did Black in this position play option A, knight to C7, attacking the white queen, bringing the bishop on C8 into the game? Did he play G6, forking the white queen and the white knight? Or did he play option C, knight takes D4, again attacking the white queen? So this is a rather interesting moment in the game. I suggest you, again, turn off the video, think about the position. You can move the pieces around on the board if you like, and then make your choice. Okay, well, knight C7, not a bad move at all. I'm going to give that 8 points. It's not the move that was chosen, but there's nothing wrong with it. It forces White to think about his queen. The queen will drop back, certainly. Of course, White's threatening to kind of move his pawns up in this position. Either G4 or E4, something like that. So Black's got to be pretty quick. He can actually recuperate here with knight D5. And that forces favourable simplification, because if White goes E4 here, we're going to chop on C3 and then play king to G8. And I think actually Black's holding this position. Well, not only holding it, he should actually be a piece up here. White's running out of steam. And although White's not without chances, White's own king is a source of concern. So knight C7 is a good move. Knight takes D4, 0 points, unfortunately, is too tactical, as it runs into queen F4, when Black has actually put himself in a self-pin, which is not exactly what you want to do in this position. So that brings us to G6, 10 points, the best move because it's completely forcing. Unfortunately now, Blackie's going to take that knight on H5 when the queen moves. So poor Sir George has got to chop off all the pieces, which is really what he doesn't want to do here. And Black is now happier, because with the pieces coming off the board, much less chance that he's going to be mated, and much more chance that he's going to be able to consolidate with the extra piece. So Sir George has got to keep on battering away. He's now only got 2 pawns for the piece. I think he plays the best move, D5. So let's see what you choose now. What will you choose in this position after D5? Will you play option A, pawn takes pawn? Will you play option B, knight to G5? Or will you play option C, knight to C5? Over to you. Okay, well, this is one of those positions where actually Black can't go wrong. I'm going to give all of those options 10 points because they're all as good as one another, I think. Taking on d5 looks dangerous because it allows the white knight in, but in reality, what can white do here? He's only got 2 pawns for the piece. He can try to block the black pieces out with a move like f3 and then e4, but after b6, you know, you can't help but feel black's going to be able to consolidate this position fairly fairly handily. So if that was your intention, you know, the 10 points are a very valid award. Knight g5 was the actual move played in the game. We'll consider that in a moment. But knight c5 is also okay. Admittedly, this way round, white can take on c6 and go rook d6 check. But this is not really a threat at all, as black can play rook e6. And after rook hd1, king e7, again, white is running out of ammo. So you can't help but think black is going to win this quite comfortably. Although, white can put a few difficulties in his way. But knight g5, again, a good move. Well, I suppose this time black's thinking about a move like knight to e4. White went rook h4. I suppose the added benefit of putting the knight on g5 for the time being is that the rook is kept out of h7. So rook h4, bishop d7 was played. Sir George swung his rook across and black defended. And then white went f4. Black dropped the knight back to f7. And now white went e4. So white is getting on with the job. He's making the best of a very bad position. And he's trying to create confusion by pushing those central pawns forward. So, what is best? Should we play option A, g5, trying to smash up the centre? Should we play option B, c takes d5? Or should we play option C, king to g7? Once again, take a look at the position carefully and then make your choice. Well, we're going to say that in a winning position, the best thing to do is to play carefully and without undue risk. Pawn takes pawn was the move played by Frank Parr. Again, I'm going to give that 10 points. It does allow the white knight into the game, but black's just going to run away and say to white, well, what have you got here? The idea is to play bishop c6 as quickly as possible. There are no discoveries with the knight. The white pawns are rather loose. This should win fairly comfortably for black. Taking a look at the other options, there's nothing wrong with g5 either. I suppose after that, white can think about strengthening the pawns with g3. Or he may play e5 check. g5 is only worth 5 points because it allows white perhaps a little too much of the game than he deserves. But of course there's nothing wrong with it. Objectively, black should be better after g5. And finally there's king g7, after which white will probably try d6. This probably suggests that I should award king g7 only 5 points, because after c5, rook b3, b5, e5, it's not that easy for white. g5, g3. Black should still be winning this, but I think the game is most clear-cut. And this is what you should be thinking about in winning positions. Keep the game clear-cut without risk. Well, as I say, there are no real discoveries from the knight, exposing the loose bishop on d7. So things are starting to get easier for black. Sir George played king d2. Black played bishop c6. White played king to e3. Black played rook b d8. White went knight c3. And now this is the final point in the game where I'm going to ask you to choose a move. So did Frank Parr play? Rook takes d1 here, swapping off. Did he play knight d6, eyeing the tasty morsel on e4? Or did he play g5, again attacking the white centre, trying to break it up, loosening the pawns still further? Remember, in a winning position, try to choose the most straightforward idea. So rook takes rook, knight d6 or g5. Back to you. Well, of course, it's possible that all these moves win. I mean, I think the black position has gone from clearly better to winning at this point. But I think the most clear-cut gaining 10 points is rook takes rook. Just swap off. The more pieces that come off the board, the more black likes it. White doesn't want to see the pieces coming off. So that is a straightforward solution, 10 points. Knight d6, again, should be winning after e5, knight f5 check. 8 points for that. Because after king f2, well, black can take on d1 again and just play rook d8. This should be winning. I don't even know if white can cause too many problems here. He does have a passed pawn at least. Finally, the move g5. White will probably go g3. G5 is slightly unnecessary. It's a bit of a luxury in this position, but again, it should be winning. I'll give you 6 points for that. As after g3, again, black can take on d1. Go knight d6. Check. It's very similar to the last variation. White drops back, a5, rook b3, rook h8. Black's getting his act together quite quickly, and it should be winning. But the game, well, very straightforward. Frank Parr took on d1. White recaptured. There was a knight coming to d6 as advertised. White put his king back on e2. I'm not sure whether that's the best move. Rook to d8. Knight came to e3. Black took it and took on g2, and the rest of this game is silence, as white really should resign, but decides to play on for a few more moves. It's all about black getting his pieces into the game, which Frank Parr does with ease, and goes on to secure a nice easy victory after rook to f3. So that was actually one of the most interesting games from the British Chess Championship in Bournemouth all those years ago. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you scored well. Let me quickly tally the possible points up. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. I think there's a maximum of 90. It might be 100. So if you're scoring anywhere over 70, you can congratulate yourself. That is an excellent score. And a well-defended game from Frank Parr, eventually converting defence into counter-attack and finishing Sir George off with ease. So thank you very much for viewing. And hopefully you'll be coming along to Bournemouth. If not, I think you can catch commentary on the web at Chess24. And if you're coming to Bournemouth, I look forward to seeing you there. So thank you very much for viewing. All the best.